make the trek out to Burning Man for a week and a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the Shadow of the Man. I'm your host, Andie. That Andie? Actually, today we have a different Andie, Andie Grace, otherwise known as Action Girl. Welcome.
Thank you. Multiple Andies. It sounds like we've got an Andie problem around here.
Yeah. Well, I remember years ago we had a little joke where like, let's start a theme camp. We'll call it the Andie Camp. And like everyone named Andie, or if you're going to camp there, you have to be called Andie for that week. That would be
It's as
fun.
good a way to organize yourselves as burners as any, right?
Yeah. So for the uninitiated people who don't know you, your brief history as far as I know is okay. I think you first went in 97.
That's
You
correct.
you started uh helping out Media Mecca in the beginning, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
then
Yes,
you were
sir.
the original Jackrabbit Speaks.
Not the original. Oh, by no means. The original
Oh.
Jackrabbit is Marion Goodell.
Oh, you took
I made
over.
Marion,
Okay.
started writing the Jackrabbit Speaks, I want to say in 97, 96. I have to check my notes on that, but I
Hmm.
became her assistant and helped her through the Media Mecca
Hmm.
indoctrination process, and helped to write the Jackrabbit beginning in around 2000. So I was your Jackrabbit for about 12 years.
Oh wow. And
Yep.
then you led the nascent regional network for a while, right?
Yeah, so after I assisted Mary, I came to Burning Man in 97, realized there was something to be, somebody behind the whole thing somewhere along the week, through friends that were volunteering downtown in Media Mecca. Uh, Shout out to Candace Locklear, Evil Pippi,
Mm-hmm.
and nurse. And I began working at the office, actually processing tickets. So data entry was, people mailed in those cool envelopes, they put art all over them, and we'd process the payment and mail people their tickets. So that was my job for a while. I was doing data entry. Somewhere along the way, I noted the registration of a media crew, and Marion started taking me. I went to that meeting with her, and I started helping with the media intake process, and shortly thereafter started working in the office,
Mm-hmm.
assisting her. Along the way, working in the various communications with the website, all the things we were writing, the Jackrabbit Speaks, the newsletter, what have you. And along the way, she said to me, "This is the year I want to do something with the regionals." I wasn't really even aware of them at that point, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
list of probably, I want to say somewhere around 35 to 40 people at that
Okay.
time that had self-identified as I want to be a person who helps organize Burning Man community where I live. And for some, that meant throwing local events. There were local events happening at that time. Flipside already did
Mm-hmm.
exist, I believe. There were people um, answering questions locally with friends, having get-togethers and
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Hey, you want to go to Burning Man? I'll tell you more about it." I go.
Uh,
But
what year was that?
that would have been around 99, 98,
Oh, okay.
99. And we began to put our heads together around, she had a list already,
Mm-hmm.
in her wisdom, had put these organizers of local community together so that they could, share notes about and resources. And we would once a year mail them a pack of newsletters and maybe some stickers and some things to, share and share culture, build community. So to say that, yeah, the network as it was very nascent. It was basically a mailing list at the time that I came on, and she and I and Larry Harvey collaborated, and the group began to grow over time, collaborated on how to support all these people out there saying, "I want to help with Burning Man the rest of the year."
Okay.
That's the
Well, we
long
can.
version.
Yeah. Well, we can get into your Burning Man experience a little more a little later, but I think just to start off, I know because part of this whole project for me, like this call started where I'm just kind of curious about like, the various personalities, even people like you. Like I've known you for a number of years, but just like your background story, it's like where do you come from? Like how does it all begin? So how does it all begin for Andie? Like, and how did
Well,
you get to Burning Man? Like, yeah, what had it lead there?
that's a great question. I have had the good fortune to ask that question of a lot of people myself because it is interesting what kind of people come to this thing in the first place and how did who they are make it what it is. So my story is basically that I moved to San Francisco in 1996 after visiting. I came here for a year and then moved back to St. Louis because that's what a lot of kids did there. We all had our rebound year. I don't know, it's a phenomenon. You
Is
can
that where
look
you
at it.
grew up?
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay.
I moved here when I was in my mid 20s. Very quickly discovered the Cacophony Society. But I joined a band around that time with someone who was involved in those antics. His name was Analog Tom Morgan, and I was a bass
Uh,
player for a band called Sex Pop. And he wanted our band, we played shows around town, some cacophony events, in fact, some underground, you know, parties and weird game shows and funky stuff that San Franciscans were doing at the
yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
I had already kind of found that milieu very intriguing and fun, and that was where I was making friends as a newcomer to this town, really feeling the cultural beat along those lines. And so when he invited me to Burning Man, I wasn't much of a camper at that time, I will admit. And so I started dating this guy that I was in a band with, and he wanted us to play at Burning Man. It was just the end all be all for him. And I was not initially that interested. Um, and yet somehow I gotta say, I guess he had me over to a slideshow, showed me some pictures. I was definitely a fan of art and
Hmm.
crazy weird happenings. And so he convinced me and my friend Jess to attend with the band. We were going to play a show on a stage that I want to say might have been, that wasn't the year we played Hair of the Dog. I think we played on a platform in Center Camp around what would have been Center Camp at that time in 1997. So I brought my bass and a tent, a full-length mirror for, I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing to do, which ended up figuring heavily into some weird games that we made up around camp. So that was fun. Uh, I brought a pair of rollerblades because somehow I thought rollerblades were going to work as a means of
Hmm.
transportation. A rank
Okay.
newbie is what you might call
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Not exactly prepared for what I was in store for. I would say that the person I was at the time I was working as was I a temp or a bartender, something where I was, you know, a middle 20s person who had just relocated and I was figuring out what my purpose was going to be. Going out there and finding this set of friends, first of all, I camped with this wonderful group, Motel 666.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found a theme camp right away, and we were the only theme camp in walk-in camping. There was nothing really happening for quite a few blocks. There were blocks at this time. They had made a street layout situation. And so of course my mind was blown by art and Jim Mason's temporal decomposition, the big ice ball
Baseball.
that was
Yeah. The
yeah,
clocks in it. Yeah.
yeah, and flamethrowers and crazy vehicles and people, but it was just really the walking around and talking to people and sitting down and having these kind of long form conversations that there was something different about that versus socializing in any way that I had done so far in my adult life. People didn't sit down and ask me what I did for a living. I don't know why that was. I can't explain
That
that.
was always a big no-no. And every time I would talk to people, be like, "So, what do you do like back in the real world?" It was always like, just like I would always get this like allergic reaction. And I was just like, I'm just like asking questions, just want to find out more about you as a person. They're like, here I am like, Jolly Roger or whatever.
Sure. And so
Like I don't
what
want to
was
be
your
that
first
person.
year? Tell me your first year again.
My first year was 96, but
Okay. So that was already a phenomenon that you were seeing, and I don't think I felt that I
yeah.
saw allergy to it. It was just not something that people asked me. We were busy talking about the moment.
Yeah.
What
Well,
did
my
you
first
do? What are
year,
you
I was only
doing?
there for
Yeah.
like 3 days or 2 days or something. Like
Okay.
it was kind of, well, 96 was kind of like a chaos year. I mean, also,
Absolutely.
it was invited by some friends and they were like, oh, you can just tag along with us. And so it was just like me and my brother, and he had this like little VW GTI, and we just had like a tarp off of it. And we just had
Yep.
these two little chairs. And like, we didn't really. know what we were doing. And so I don't know. And I don't think we were there quite long enough, to really kind of get out and like talk to people because I think we got there was like Friday night or Saturday morning or something, and then we left like Monday morning. And by the time I was like out wandering around talking to people, like a lot of people were leaving.
Well, and the event wasn't very long then, except for the people who'd been there
Yeah,
setting up.
yeah,
And, at the time that we both attended, I think there wasn't a lot of, you didn't have media that were telling you what you were going to expect and how to
yeah,
prepare and how you were going to engage with this environment. So
yeah,
it was fortunate in my book. It was great fun to come and have my mind completely wholesale. The
yeah,
roof was like ripped off of my experience. There weren't
yeah.
I've been to maybe like festivals as a kid, music festivals with my parents. That was
Hmm.
maybe the comparable thing, or group campouts. Um, there was nothing to wrap my head around what to expect. And so coming in, anything was possible. It was an engine for like plugging myself in and being like, I am Jolly Roger.
Yeah. Well,
And
I mean, I
yeah.
commend you for like not just like staying at your camp and actually like wandering around and like meeting other people because I know like yeah, my first experience like in 96 like yeah, we didn't really very much like leave. We just kind of like we were invited by some friends and then I don't know, it felt like kind of shy, it's like, oh, there's all these strangers, I don't know, and it took a couple of years, and then like we started the theme camp and then I don't know, kind of got like stuck in our own camp.
Well,
But
no, that's true for me too, but I will say that I
yeah.
had the fortune of having a couple of anchors of we're going to go over to so and so's camp and say hi to him. In fact,
Yeah.
I don't think I was dating Tom yet, but he had convinced me to come.
Hmm.
Walking around, I happened, like I said, to be in a theme camp already, and we were kind of the only bar for miles. Okay, so there were people walking up, and I was already meeting this group who had camped together in '96, and they were already kind of connected through a literary and cultural scene in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
And so I was fascinated. I was like, I get to just walk in and say, hi, can I be your friend? And then we play together and go see art. That's really cool. That was a great thing. And
Hmm.
then going out and seeing the other things that people had put their minds to, and then by the end of the week realizing, oh, and someone organizes all of this.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
spark was lit, and I came back to the city and went to a flambe lounge event, which was a social event held at
Oh.
Anon Salon, I think at the time,
Oh
where
yeah.
someone like Marion, Stephen Raspa, people were hanging out. It was a way to go kind of plug in and meet
Yeah, I think I
people
remember
and
that.
address volunteer opportunities, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, because I lived
And
in
yeah,
San Francisco like 94 to
that's right. You did.
2001. Like,
You did.
yeah, I remember there was like these like scavenger hunts and things and yeah, there was this one scavenger hunt and it ended up with a party in Oakland or Berkeley or somewhere and you had to go to like Treasure Island and look at the back of a street sign and get like the directions to a bar and then over there and I remember like we went and we submitted our ans like our score and they like rejected it and we're like what? And they were like, well, if this is true, then you guys would be like by far the winners. So we're like, well, yeah. And it's like, well, here, this first place that you went to, the House of O, you got this like high score. That's impossible. We're like, why is that impossible? It's just like everybody who went there, like nobody got a good score. And I was like, well, we were the first ones who got there. And I can't remember the lady who was doing that particular place, but I think like she had just dropped acid like right when we got
That is
there.
a danger of this cultural echelon
Yeah. So I
sometimes.
think before it kicked in, she was like, "You guys are awesome," and then everybody else was just like, "Ah."
You're stoking me to remember the greeter that greeted me at my first Burning Man because we arrived at about 2 a.m. And it
Uh-huh.
was a chaotic, like, you can't, those lanes don't make any sense when you've never been to such a place. And there were barely lanes at that point
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
this person was clearly altered. And didn't know where I was going. I don't know how we found our way to our friends in the first place, but,
Yeah.
it was an empty slate at that time.
Yeah.
Um, I often wonder, those events where you go and someone is, uh, the scavenger hunt was the kind of thing that San Francisco had that St. Louis didn't have at that time in my life. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
remember those like Race to the End of the Night, Journey to the End of the Night might have been the names of things like that, or
Hmm.
and you go on them and you're like, who set all this up? Who
Yeah, I
took the
know.
time to make this and go put the thing on Treasure Island and blah blah? And that was the curiosity that I hit that led me to go ask to be introduced to Marion to volunteer that led to me working there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it was funny, like I was just thinking about that when you were like, oh, when you got to Burning Man, like or when your first years and it was dark and you didn't know where to go. I was just remembering like in '97, I think we camped on like it was either the A or the B street at like 7 o'clock ish kind of area. And I think we got there like on a Wednesday and it was completely open.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was like, and then even talking, because I remember Motel 666. You guys were like on the 2 o'clock side, like in the back or
We were
something
at
like,
about four
or
o'clock and walk in.
yeah. But the
Yeah.
walk-in would be today's like E Street or something, or
Yeah, I
F,
mean,
or
size wise, yeah. You still
yeah,
have walk-in camping, but it's out past what,
yeah. It's not
J?
like J or
Yeah. Yeah.
something. Yeah.
And a bunch of my friends who were involved at the Motel 666 still camp in that area
Oh, really?
under a different name and do a different project. And maybe we'll
Uh,
talk about that at some point too. But
sure,
the
sure.
shred of all of that is still there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, like I said, covers kind of like what got you to Burning Man. But yeah, what about your, I mean, we covered
I
a little bit of
followed my
your,
band, man.
but then you found your heart.
I did. I did.
Yeah. Well, talk
Uh,
about that.
Very quickly, that became, it was already kind of my milieu in San Francisco, and that sealed the deal. My band came back the next year. We played at Hair of the Dog,
Hmm.
in '98, which was a great experience. And I just kept plugging in and falling farther in. I was a college student, as well. I think that's when I was working as a counselor at a children's home when I started going to Burning Man. I remember now. And I was attending college. And then eventually, after working part-time doing that data entry, Marion offered me a full-time job. So that is when I began participating with her in the senior staff process and helping to manage Media Mecca became kind of my primary role.
So that
So
was like
that
later '90s. That's kind of because Burning Man kind of first professionalized, I guess, incorporated like in '97 after the chaos of '96 and like '97 they came back like that was like their
VLLC, yeah.
yeah. And so then over the next few years, I guess well, I guess it's been a process over the years of just professionalization and just
Yeah.
growing.
I mean, this was a time when, as those processes started to become concrete and need more year-round attention, like the
Hmm.
writing of the permit
Hmm.
takes full-time people, a year-round process working with that organization at this point.
Hmm.
At that time, there were times I went to government meetings in Reno with the BLM and the agencies because of my communications role. I was writing things to talk to the public about
Hmm.
that process, and sometimes we needed to mobilize people around
Hmm.
Nevada legislation over time. So my role in communications, supporting Marion in that way, kind of put me into relationship with that whole burgeoning organization as it built all those community services that built up around
Hmm.
population starting to double as I took that role.
Yeah.
Population began to scale very quickly, and all those other
Hmm.
teams began to grow. So we started moving to bigger offices, carving out offices in the basement for people.
Hmm.
DPW was developing a really intricate leadership structure to get things done. You name it, each department was burgeoning.
And
It was a
back
really exciting time to be there. It was fun.
Yeah. And then I think something I'm not sure many like newer burners or listeners might understand, but this is not like it was a collection of like MBA grads putting this all
I
together.
wouldn't say that. No.
I mean, it was a lot of anarchists, a lot of cacophony, I mean, it came from like the artistic, Burning Man kind of community. And I remember like '96 was a big transition year. So some people left and you know, to, Larry wanted to keep it going, and so it's like, okay, we need to take it in this new direction. We need to professionalize, and I don't think it was quite natural for a lot of people to organize all this stuff, and like I said, like going to government meetings and getting the permits and interfacing with the BLM.
On the face of it, that's true. And yet
Mhm.
also, you have a core of people who did come from technologists.
Oh, that's true,
You had, Harley, I can
Michael.
name names of all of these people. Michael,
Mhm.
technology, the knowledge of how to work with groups of people, the knowledge of communications that came to bear. uh, beginning to work with those agencies, they had some capacity for that.
Hmm.
They I think that's what drew them to want to get it done. Like, let's not give
Hmm.
up. We can put a little structure around this. And hey, if we're going to work with people, let's make a little database and let's send them newsletters and communicate.
Hmm.
There was a milieu of people that worked in those industries because the tech industry was based here. So it was not only, you know, artists and people who were kind of like, what do we do now?
Hmm.
There was a parallel setting where uh the dot-com boom happened right around
Hmm.
then. And so, watching how businesses were doing things, we were growing up right alongside that. So we could take our cues from that. And we had access to a lot of people who were participating in the event who had opinions and had ideas and wanted to step forward and volunteer services right away. One
Hmm.
of the earliest, for example, technological boons was an offer of volunteerism and web hosting space from that we wouldn't have known how to ask for. We had a website, but
Uh-huh.
what do we do with it was somebody volunteering and saying, I believe in what you're doing and I'm gonna step in and offer this. And that's why you have the robust technological setting that you have today, because Marion and crew knew to go say, yeah, let's support that. Let's work with that.
Was that
That's just one
Laughing
example.
Squid?
That would have actually been Brian Bellendorf at
Oh,
Hypereal.
oh yeah.
Hyper.
Okay.
I just did an interview with him the other day, getting into
Oh
this
wow.
history, as a matter of fact. So
And then I could just imagine it's like Candace Locklear, right? I mean, I'm sure like as time goes by, and like Burning Man is like going in this new professional direction, like it just naturally attracts people. Like you said, like people will step forward and be like, "Oh, I have this background, I have this experience," and they come in and just being like, "What you're doing, like, let me help you out here."
yeah, like you mentioned, Candace Locklear, she
Hmm.
was one of a group of people in that 96, 97 era, arriving and saying, you need help with the fact that you have press crawling around here trying to figure out what the story is. And had that professional knowledge to say, if you don't tell them something about what it is, they're just going to make up what they think they see. And that very quickly, the process that I walked into at Media Mecca as a volunteer, really on the playa for the first time in 98,
Hmm.
was we take their information, we put them through a little acclimation, we were dressing them up, and making them kind of take off that vest with the little film rolls in it and,
Yeah.
immerse yourself in the community a little bit and get to know this thing. And the other rule that I remember from that era that was really important was, that was already fully formed and came from this professional advice, was don't let them just swing in, get the interview with Larry Harvey and leave.
Hmm.
Because this is a very immersive and individualized experience. Make them come and become part of it and do something, and get their information and talk to them a little bit. And that was the time that we were also organizing around how to deal with the use of images and privacy and that question, when cameras were big and obvious.
Yeah.
So there's a whole
Yeah.
history there that I could dive
Yeah.
into for some time. But
Yeah. Well, also there's no Wi-Fi, no
no
cell
Wi-Fi.
signal. I mean,
Actually, that's not true either, Andrew.
really?
Andy, there was a group called Cyberbus back then that
Oh
you look at them now and you'll
yeah.
see the silver people and this bus, and you're like, they would dive into the party and they would show up and Cyberbus. They had Wi-Fi on that bus. They had internet on that bus. You could sit down at a
Really?
terminal from Burning Man, from several places, and access the
Wow.
internet at that time. So these are people who were nerding out on technology pretty early on. Those were
Oh
birders. So
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I remember seeing like I don't know when it was, like maybe late 90s, early 2000s, but like not a drone swarm, but like maybe like four drones like in the sky, and just back then just being like, what are these crazy points of light in the sky
Yes.
moving like in a
Yeah.
square? We're like, oh, you must be high. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I'm completely sober. I mean, now,
Yeah.
I see images of like penises and stuff in the sky, and you're like,
Yeah. That's what happens when you let the people have control of making the art. But it
yeah.
was amusing, and I there's a funny story behind that too. But it
Yeah.
was women who drew that image, is what I'm told.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
For these drones that you can program, and the audience could have a turn at
Yeah.
the controls as
And
well.
then this year, I mean, like it's incredible. I mean, there was like a blinking eyeball or something. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, absolutely incredible. So yeah, like your Burning Man experience. I guess we've covered a lot of that. So then, like the regional network. So how long? So you did the Jackrabbit Speaks for like 12 years or something, and
Yep.
then How long were you involved with like the regional network for?
So the regional network was, I had basically had two jobs from that point on, and you could say that the regional network was part of supporting a communications of what's the story of Burning Man out in the world. But it was more a listening and supporting thing of you want to do Burning Man where you are. That sounds like it rhymes with what we're talking about, and you're feeling like, we just wanted to support people with tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in what, 2004 was when Larry wrote down his observations about what that looked like in the world. What does Burning Man
Mm-hmm.
look like in these spaces? And came up with this 10 principles document.
Mm-hmm.
That was when you can really say there was a regional network created because the 10 principles became sort of a scheduled part of an agreement that we wrote down with these regionals for the first time that year. So instead of just getting an email address and a box of literature to share, you were becoming part of this cultural network. Didn't mean anything financial,
Mm-hmm.
fiscal, except for that if you were going to act in the name and use certain trademarks, you had to hit certain markers, and we still see that in use today.
Oh
As
yeah.
far as how you qualify to be an official regional event, something
Mm-hmm.
that had to be done. I think in order to protect a trademark, you have to keep it. You have to prevent others
Mm-hmm.
from using it without your permission, etc. So that's baseline. And but also supporting the culture in the world meant making sure that everything that's happening is resonant with what we mean when we say
Mm-hmm.
Burning Man. So you don't have a Pepsi rave off somewhere that you can't do anything about. You know what I mean? This is a random example.
Pepsi rave.
Um, so that became, a lot of listening to the regional network. What do you need from us as a
Mm-hmm.
central organization? It's not like we weren't trying to create a model where it's like the home office over here in Scranton or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's not a
Uh,
franchise operation,
Not at
right?
all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And yet, what grew up around that it has been one of the most fascinating parts about it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Watching very early on as people were somehow intrinsically motivated to organize around, I'm a burner, you're a burner. Something happened in my community that I want to participate in and be a part of. I remember Arizona burners, Gary
Mm-hmm.
Taylor and friends out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm forgetting names now. I'm very sorry, but
Eh, yeah.
way early on, getting everybody together, not just to have a burner party, but to help refurb a local school
Mm-hmm.
with a theater. I think it was an outdoor theater or something like that. And I
Okay.
could name a bunch of other projects like that. We started to see people doing a little bit more meaning making with their Burning Man experience together out there in the world. And that was pre-Katrina, pre-BWB. People already had this urge
Mm-hmm.
to take the principles, take the observable experience of being out at Burning Man, and bring it into another part of their lives and do stuff together with other people who believed in it. So that was exciting to figure out how to provide tools for, and to participate and to see in action all over the world. Incredible, just
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Well, I guess we had like the regionals list, and there was that was very active. I remember at certain points I was talking. I remember Jeff, like Jeff would just be like, "I'm not paying attention to that anymore." There's like 1,000 emails a day,
Yeah.
you know. But it was very robust. I mean, and then like the summits and the leadership conferences came around. There was the yearly, the very boozy first camp. I think that's kind of
Yes, I mean we had our party to celebrate and
yeah. So I
but
remember
we
talking.
started to have those events where you could get together and share face to face with each other. How do you do what you do? Because I don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing I mean I know what the actions are,
Uh,
but what you need and how you can do what you're doing as a regional contact where
hmm.
you are, uh, you have as much or more to tell each other about that process than
Yeah,
Andie Grace
yeah.
sitting in a home office trying to keep up with the traffic of thousands of emails. And this was pre-social media for the most part. I mean,
Oh
tribes started
yeah.
to emerge out of
Tribe,
that, but
yeah.
that list really was where a lot of the standing off of the corners and the creative, because Larry was on that list, Marion was on that list,
Hmm.
Michael's still on that list. They all listen. Those people are kind of not arbiters of the culture, but they describe and participate in and help create and maintain that culture in the world. So getting them together and being able to be with each other became
Hmm.
part of that role. Part of the resources that we put to how we could support them was to make sure they had lots of contact with each other.
Yeah. Well, now it's like social media because I mean the regionals list nowadays is like not. really as much traffic as it used to be. Is it just that the conversation is kind of like splintered off into various different like venues, or what do you
It
think?
would have to be
Yeah.
by nature of what it is. It's not supposed to be a centralized
Uh-huh.
thing, right? It's a culture. So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to happen in its sub pockets everywhere. And they're going to create meaning around what emerges there locally.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why some places have these really robust camp out style events that you go do a multi-day look-alike feeling, sort of there's a burn at the end. We go immerse ourselves in that. The 10 principles are posted at the front. Other places may choose a completely different path, decide that they want to do a lot of little events. They do stuff that doesn't involve music or dancing or art, or there's a lot of ways that Burning Man shows up and means something to people. So, yeah, there's there's a million examples, because when
Oh
you
yeah.
started to see Burners Without Borders emerge, it was a manifestation of kind of the same thing, and they married with one another
Mm-hmm.
very quickly. Regional chapters of BWB emerged that I would say are hyper involved and intricately married to the same sort of corporal body of people out there.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the other 51 weeks of the year, right? I mean, the whole like everywhere kind of
Yeah.
project was, it's like regionals and BWB and well, it used to be BlackRock Arts. What's it now? Or
The BlackRock Arts Foundation,
yeah.
these are things that are now folded into the mission of the larger
Yeah.
organization, and they exist as programs within.
Mm-hmm.
BlackRock Arts Foundation is the arts within Burning Man. The various arts programs that you see now, they
Mm-hmm.
just became a program of that entity. The art that Burning Man supports in the world. And there's lots of different
Mm-hmm.
programs now that do that. BWB is still in existence, and boy, could I go on at that length about them for some time. And that process, it's been a huge part of my own life.
Uh-huh.
But that began in 2005. Burners Without Borders is now a support network for all kinds of actions in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what Burning Man's project supports as well today.
Okay. I just thought
And
of
then
something.
BlackRock Solar had
Oh
its
yeah.
an emphasis in the world that it took on, and it was burners saying, here's a thing that we think could happen. And they did a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
work in Nevada, did a lot of great things, and fulfilled a wonderful mission. And that's another example of, wow, I didn't think about that, but that's Burning Man in the world too. You can drive past it on the way into town, into
Mm-hmm.
Black Rock City, sorry.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
go through the towns, you'll see that the solar that Black Rock Solar built is still on their schools, because somebody said, this is what Burning Man means to me in the world.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so you did Jackrabbit Speaks, you did the regionals. I mean, have you just been like a staff member like continuously this whole time or
I have not. In 2012, I was at that time called the Regional Network Manager and Communications Manager. I had two
hmm
roles. And I decided to cast a sail into the great wide world,
hmm
and step aside for a while and see what else would happen for me and for the organization. But I didn't stop burning by any stretch of the
hmm
imagination. I did leave full-time employment. I would say that 4 or 5 years 4 years of the 8 year stretch that ensued, I did some kind of contract work or heavily volunteered. I stepped in and managed Media Mecca one year for someone on maternity leave
hmm
when Juno was out, and volunteered several years there. I don't think I was ever very far away, but I
hmm
worked in other careers for those 8 years. I had a film distribution company, and I worked in
Yeah.
video games. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And that was great. And it was interesting to go out in the world, and see what else I had to learn and offer. And I've always, I mean, working at Media Mecca, working with filmmakers and media makers was my favorite thing. I still love it. And I love
hmm
creating that content as well. So learning a lot more about that world, and still never being very far away from Burning Man, never got all of it entirely out of my system. And when I decided to move on from what was then, I was working in video games, and I decided, well, I'm going to see what else is out there. And Marion Goodell called me the next day and said, I heard that you might be back in the job market. And we had a good conversation, and
Uh-huh.
I agreed that this really was the most interesting thing I had ever done with my time. And that these people were working on something that means a whole lot to me. And I had never really let go of my desire to continue contributing to it. So I stepped back in 2018.
Oh, okay.
And
So
in that role, I'm a producer.
okay. So
That's
what's your role now? So you're working with the Philosophical Center?
The Philosophical Center is
Uh,
kind of the house for this whole discussion of looking back on the 10 principles and beyond. What does Burning Man mean? What
uh-huh.
do we mean when we say it? And where we house kind of the storytelling and the archival content and the discussions around the philosophical underpinnings of this culture. And so that has meant, what have we done over time? We've done the podcast. We launched the podcast in around 2019, I think, was the first
Hmm.
episode. But also we help maintain the archives, video archive, um, and that I've worked on some film projects that were continuing to tell the story of Burning Man. So we work a lot with people who are coming to work on documentaries about the event and that sort of thing,
Hmm.
working in the realm of storytelling of what is Burning Man meant all this time, and that, trying to say what Burning Man is or means, I'm never going to try to do that, but I
Well,
I came back to
it's
help
nice to
collect
put a
stories.
yeah, I put a microphone in front of someone and she's like, I'm not going to tell you, you tell me, like what you think it is. Because like you said, like there's a
Yes.
million different stories. It just seems like this is such a natural role for you, I mean,
Yes.
almost kind of,
It's great because I mean the
yeah.
other thing we worked on is publishing. We've done a few books now. One book
Hmm.
about the regional network, and one. Have you seen that one yet? You
No.
just made a face like you haven't seen Roxanne's book.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
Oh,
one
wait
of
a
the
minute.
book.
Is that the one? I forgot what's her name, but she traveled around to the different.
That's right, Roxanne B.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why am I? You're gonna have to edit this, Andy, because I'm forgetting the name of the book right now. It's on my shelf. Hold on.
Uh,
Once Upon a Time in the Dust by Roxanne
ah,
Burstow.
okay.
And she went to regional events around the world and wrote about a whole year of traveling to
Yeah.
the events to try to
Well, I remember
discern.
listening to the podcast episode about what we had her
Yes.
on to. Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and she's continued to go. So working with her as she was in close to final edits,
Uh-huh.
on us helping to support and bolster the story with any information she might need from the greater archive. And
Uh-huh.
then we helped her publish that book and release it to the world. We also, um, I mean, acting as a publisher right now. It's a fascinating experiment. Books are a way that you hold culture. So
Yeah.
um, that was one of three projects that we worked on. We did
What about Coyote's book?
Coyote's book was the first.
I
Burn
loved his book.
Built to
Yeah.
Burn
I
is so
mean,
much fun.
I told him I was like I one day I was like this was sitting I got it and was just like sitting around and I was like I'll just read one chapter.
No, it's
Four
a
hours later I was like well like oh my God I did nothing today. All I did was just read this book.
it's a great picture of that time that you and I came into the picture here
Yeah.
of
It fills in a lot
of
of holes for me too. I was just like all of
yeah.
these other things happened while I was like oh
Yeah, yeah. So that's an example of, there's a set of philosophical seeds of information about who we were and how we came to be and what we
yeah
are.
yeah.
And Caveat's book, of course, too. Please cut these ums and ahs out.
Oh, that's okay.
Turn your life
This is
into art.
natural. No
Turn your
editing.
life into art.
Oh yeah, I gotta get that
Uh,
one. I haven't read that book
and
yet.
these are philosophical explorations of what Burning Man means in the world. So supporting those writings has been part of my role. And then about a year and a half ago, we undertook the Oral History Project. And so I have been putting most of my cycles into going back and having this exact kind of conversation with a lot of the cultural players from
Hmm.
throughout our history. Who are you? Where did you come from? How did you find your way to Burning Man? And what did you see and experience when you got there? And what do you think of it all?
Yeah.
Um, and putting those into a repository that right now is just going into an archive. That's the only, we've put a few of them as highlights on the podcast, and that's been fun.
Yeah, those are
To
that makes some of
yeah,
the best episodes, I
they're
thought. Yeah,
great. There's some really entertaining stories in there,
yeah.
and some, some real meaning to be found.
Have you
And
found that because it's a couple of people I've interviewed so far, they're a little reluctant to talk about themselves.
that is very true. That
Yeah,
is
they're
very
like,
true.
no, it's not me. It's more of the community. It's more of the art or the projects they're working on, or they want to talk about like the philosophy or whatever. It's just like, no, no, me, I'm not so important. But I try to be like, no, actually, it's like there's probably quite a lot of people who are curious. Like who are you? Like what draw you to
Yep.
this? I mean,
Yep.
it's the full story.
As an interviewer, it's interesting line to figure out how to dig into, because you don't want, some people really do have reasons that they want to keep certain things to
Oh
themselves, and they're just private
yeah,
people.
yeah.
And they don't want to say, for example, how they grew up. That's how I ask people,
Hmm.
who are you? Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up?
So what is your
Um,
mother's maiden name and what street did you grow up and what was your
yeah,
first
and like,
pet and like
did you like your
yeah.
parents? And there's some deep stuff in there. So
Yeah,
whatever they
yeah.
choose to say and reveal about themselves in that moment leads
Uh-huh.
them to, remembering we're here to talk about Burning Man, and they will
Yeah.
usually get to what's relevant about themselves, but you might have to pull it out of them.
Yeah. So what is your shadow? Like this whole like theme of the show, the shadow of the man, like it was like how has Burning Man like affected or changed your life? I mean, I try to shy away from like, oh, what do you think your life would be like without going to Burning Man? Like who knows? But it's like it seems to me like, it's a tremendous influence in your life. I mean, look at someone like Larry. I mean, it just completely reoriented his life entirely. So it's a mission for the
Yes.
rest of his life. But I mean, some people they'll go for like 1 year and then like never go again, but yet it has this effect on their life. So, but like, how about for you? How would you say, like, looking back over all these years, I
I would say that if I try to imagine the life where I didn't find my way to Burning Man the way I did, it's almost as if I was trying to swim around an ocean liner. There was going to be something else that pulled me toward it, and I would have ended up there eventually.
uh-huh.
Uh, and I can't explain why. But I got to be involved at a moment and work with people like Larry.
Hmm.
And this experience can't help but, like I said, rip the roof off of who you are, and help to shape me as a person, for sure. I
Hmm.
am a different person because of it. Um, and part of that is, gosh, I mean, it's hard to compare it to anything else, because where else would something that I did back
Well,
then?
not so much like what could have been, but just like what is. It's like I mean, you've met all sorts of people that influence
I've
you.
met all
Met
sorts of
Tom,
people.
right? I mean,
I met my husband as a volunteer at Media
uh-huh.
Mecca.
Yeah.
We were friends for 10 years, before Hurricane Katrina hit.
Hmm.
And uh, TLDR version is that I went down to participate as burners are down here doing stuff. I'm going to go down and see what's going on, and the organization's here. We're helping to filter volunteerism and money in this direction. I went down. We realized our feelings for one another through that storm recovery process, and have a child whose middle name is named after a small town in Mississippi where we realized we were in love. So that you can't help but say Burning Man deeply affected my life in that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And so many people have I met my partner at Burning Man story,
Hmm.
or I found my people at Burning Man story. My entire friend network, not exclusively,
Hmm.
in a way that sounds culty and weird, because it does kind of when you say it out loud. But most of my friends are burners, and I
Yeah.
have deep and abiding friendships that I don't. When you look at community in people's lives, and the people that I know that aren't burners, um, and how they show up for one another when the chips are down, who's there when one of us experiences a loss, or has an accident, or is ill, or wants to build something, or wants to start a business, or wants to throw a party. Um, and the way that this community shows up for each other is unique and different. And I think it's partly because we have so much discourse with each other,
Hmm.
and we kind of it's always been a very diverse group of people. And I'm not
Hmm.
just talking about racially diverse, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But coming to it from all different walks of lives and saying, yeah, but we're going to do this weird thing together. Um, you can't say there's a homogenous experience of Burning Man. Um, like, until the dust storm hits, perhaps. Then we all get our ass handed to us. But it's come to mean so many different things that but when I look at who's showing up in my life when the chips are down for me or who I'm motivated to go toward, I find it very easy to be earnest with my burner friends and
Hmm.
say, this is what we do. Let's go. Put your shoulder into it. Donate. So and so's got a GoFundMe open.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't sit in another community to know how different that would be if I was just
Yeah.
that is a GoFundMe.
Uh-huh.
Someone in our community, in your community, has an accident. Okay. I hear about a burner in Hawaii who had this
Uh-huh.
accident. Something about that moves me, and I help them.
Or the Lahaina fires or something like that.
The
Like,
fires, or
yeah, yeah,
really after a disaster.
yeah.
Something motivates us along lines here to help each other in that way and help strangers in this
Hmm.
community. um, that I think is it's a tight bond. And having been a part of it for so long, um, it's hard for me to imagine a life without that kind of agency with others in my life. I don't know what that looks
Yeah.
like elsewhere. If
Well,
that makes any sense.
yeah, no, because I mean, the more that I've thought about it over the years, like to me, it's Burning Man is just it's kind of the word I keep coming down to is just like a community. It's just like it's like our common connection with each other, and like we were talking about before, it's like when you get to the playa, it's like who you are, everything, it just kind of washes off. And here, it's just like you're this new babe, and
Yep,
and it just strips away these like divisions and I mean, I guess in the rest of society, there are other groups. I mean, there's like religions, churches. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest
sure.
examples of that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure
a
like in
great
like
thing.
the military, it's like, the bond of like brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever, but especially this now 2024 election year where we're like almost like a week away from the election. I mean, there's so much like discord and people like going on each other's throats, like this 50% versus that 50%. You're gonna like, is there gonna be war? We're gonna kill each other. It's like, maybe we're all one family. Maybe we can
You
all like,
are hitting a very fine point there
uh,
because uh, I mean, we kind of look at, I cannot speak for the organization about what Burning Man is going through right now, but there's a public
it's a
discourse
tough
going
time.
on.
Yeah.
And when you mention what America is going through,
Hmm.
I think that it is not a dissimilar inflection point because, yes, we are a community. Burning Man is a community, but we're also a constellation of a lot of communities, of
Oh
smaller
yeah.
communities.
Oh yeah.
And for each of them, what meaning they've made out of Burning Man becomes the thing that they would use to guide getting through this moment
Hmm.
as an organization for Burning Man. But kind of like America, there's not a guidebook that anybody's written about how Burning Man should do this moment.
Hmm.
And all of these things that we're talking about now that have historically been a part of it, not just that week in the desert, those other
Hmm.
51 weeks, aren't new on the scene, are they?
Yeah.
We've been doing that part for just as almost as long.
Hmm.
Uh, and it got a name and it got an agreement to go underneath it, and it became a formal network over time. But we've been doing this other 51 weeks together for a long time.
Yeah.
And the only hope I think for getting through it is not just saying my story is the right story. My story is the version of America. My story is the one Burning Man should listen to and focus on right now.
Uh-huh.
It's about like, okay, lean into the fact that we don't know, but we all have to work together on it because we agree we're
Yeah.
at least all part of something bigger than ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
That's all
think
we've got.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the bedrock is like, yeah, our common kind of connection. It's like we might disagree on the details, but it's like, a dysfunctional family going home for Thanksgiving. It's like we are still family, okay? Like, Uncle Buck, okay, he might go on his political tirade. He's like, just pass me the mashed potatoes.
Right. I mean, at least we have mashed potatoes, you
Yeah.
know?
We can all
Uh,
agree that we like mashed potatoes.
and we don't know what is going to happen next.
Yeah. But
And
we'll
but
make it through it. I mean,
we
I think,
will. Burning
yeah, I
Man's
mean,
going to
whether
happen
it's,
next year.
oh,
We know
yeah.
this.
I mean, like we always say, it's an evolution every year. I mean, people might be like, oh, it's not the same as it was, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 25, whatever, it's like, but it's back and it's here and we're together and it's a community.
Right, right. And I mean, when I say Burning Man's going to happen next year, Black Rock City will be built next year. I'll tell you
Hmm.
that. Burning
Oh,
Man
yeah.
as a community is going to be next year. People are still going to do the things that they're doing. That is Burning Man in the world, and I think the organization is going to persist as well.
Hmm.
And I think all of these things that we're talking about are going to remain part of that story. I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
I don't, this is an inflection point, but I think that these are all important cultural touchstones to remember that this has always been what we are. It has not,
yeah,
it's never been, if it was a party in the desert, I would not have given up my career
yeah,
path to it. I
yeah.
would have been bored with that when
Exactly.
I was never a party girl in my 20s in the first place. But,
Yeah,
I think I kind of became one in this setting because
yeah.
there
I
was such a
was.
party to it. It's a big
Yeah.
celebration.
I think
Uh,
when you're in your 20s, it's like, yeah, more, I don't know. I was more of a party person, but now, like, the older, I'm like, what, 53 now? Yeah, I'm like,
yeah.
I like going to
Yeah.
bed at 10 o'clock.
But I mean, I went to parties in my 20s, but I was looking for a career with meaning, right? I was still
Hmm.
in school. I was pursuing something. I was pursuing a set of studies.
Hmm.
And when I saw this experiment, it became more compelling to me as a picture of what I could dedicate my time to. Why did I give up so much of my time and energy? It
Hmm.
wasn't so that we could go have a place to go party our brains out in the middle of the
Yeah.
desert once a year.
Yeah. That gets old
And
pretty fast.
it
Yeah.
does get, and it's not going to
Yeah.
sustain. You got to have kids. You got to have older people. You got to have
Hmm.
generations coming through it. You got to have new ideas, weird new art that maybe wasn't there at the beginning.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
always love the fact that all the lights are all the way around anymore. I used to like being able to see the open, dark desert, but there's a million really cool lit up art things in the night now that
Yeah.
didn't exist in the world before and that are blowing people's minds. So things are going to change. But
Yeah.
it's
Well,
the
maybe
it's
these
some of
difficult.
its parts. It's not any one little thing. It's not a week
Yeah.
in a year.
Well, maybe these difficult times, it's, one way to look at it is also like an opportunity. It's like, I mean, who knows like what new things can come from it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people kind of just focusing on the negative, but I don't know. I always try to, like more figure out just like, it's like instead of figuring out like who to blame, like let's figure out like how to fix the problem. Like what can we do? Like what lessons can we learn and how can we move on and, maybe try something new, maybe try some experiments, whatever, but like you said, there's a momentum. Burning Man will still happen. Like the regional network people will still keep getting together. The
Yep.
community will go on, but maybe through these conversations, I don't know, we'll reach some new places and
Yep.
yeah.
It's interesting when you talk about the sort of vitriol that comes, especially in the
Social
public,
media.
social court of public opinion, social media.
Yeah.
But I reflect on all the conversations on that regional list over the years.
Uh,
We've had some hot moments in this community,
oh yeah.
and that group has found a way to have really complicated and emotional conversations in a civilized way without us having to say there's a lot of rules around that. And that's
Hmm.
really interesting to me that it must be it's an explanation of something about the doer in the world because those are doers who stepped forward, right? So
Yeah.
um
Well, also we within like you're saying within the regional network, we're kind of known to each other. I think like
yeah,
social media that might be like sometimes people you don't know or they're kind of hiding
no, for
behind,
sure. Armchair
like,
quarterbacking. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's like it's really easy to kind of throw bombs when you're just kind of like, oh, you're Sparkle Pony 521, like, but if it's like, oh, I know it's like Andy said this horrible thing about me, it's like
Right. And at the same time, that is the community that is out there doing Burning Man. They make Burning Man.
Hmm.
Their description of what Burning Man is true.
Hmm.
They are making the thing. We're all right in a way. And so you can't not listen to that court of public opinion. You have
Hmm.
to measure that sentiment. You have to take the direct feedback into the big machine and carve off the corners where it is causing people to not be able to have their story be included in part of that and
Hmm.
or throw a floor under it when it's like, hey, we're doing burners without border stuff here in the world. Okay, let's give you a list. Let's give you a resource. Let's give you a website. What we can do as a central organization.
Hmm.
Um, if there wasn't a central organization, the regionals would stay in touch with one another. There's plenty of
Hmm.
tools for that. They would create something else. I think it would still look a lot like a lot of nodes that are connected in some way. And I think an organization can be beneficial to keep resources underneath that and keep
Hmm.
that cohesive. So I hope that that part of it
Yeah.
persists for a long time.
Oh, I'm
I
sure it
think there's a
will.
lot of good still to be
Yeah.
done in the world with what Burning Man
Yeah.
means. Yeah.
And then I don't know, something in my last interview, I was interviewing Natty Goldman, uh, and he was asking a question. He was just like, well, Andy, what is a burner? And I was like, because I don't know, I was on the playa this year. So I was camped at elsewhere, right? And I remember it was coming up. There was like different people having a debate because I know, Athena, with her God, what is it? I always forget the name of the virtual reality,
The VR project,
the
BRC
VR
VR.
VRC VR. Yeah, yeah. Um, and then it was just kind of the whole debate of like, it's like, well, if you participated in VR, like, are you really a burner? And then it's just kind of like, well, then like it's I don't know, the whole like burnier than thou, or it's like, are there no true burners kind of
Well,
fallacy?
that's
Like, it's like what is actually a burner? And
well,
it's
that's
an
a
interesting question,
That's a great object lesson when you mentioned BRC VR.
Uh-huh.
How can you possibly understand whether or not that's true? Well, with
Hmm.
a story about someone on the other side of the world who cannot come to Burning Man
Hmm.
in Black Rock City, who may have, for the first time, finally said, "Well, there's a way I can dip into what this means." And a
Hmm.
human being, I've heard these stories about putting on that headset and going into BRC VR and having a live conversation with another person
Mm.
on the other side of the world about a piece of art that was built in there and making new friends and participating in this community. Whether that's better than or more valid than standing in the dirt and seeing the Vegematic blowing fire at an
Hmm.
ice ball that changed my life. I don't know. I can't describe what meaning that has for that person, but they came away and told someone else about it because I heard the story. I heard the story of how that meant something to them and what they felt. They were like, "Oh, I get it. Burning Man's cool."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of come back to this whole kind of like Burning Man as a community type of thing, and it's like I mean, whether you make the trek all the way out to Black Rock City, or you just go to your local regional burn, or like you said, like you meet up with people online, and it's like you're not even physically there. It's like you have made a connection, and like in time, maybe we show up to one of those regional events, or you make it out to Black Rock City. It's like, yeah, it'll be like second nature. So, but I don't know. It's an interesting debate because like at the camp, because there was like there is some people on one side, some people on the other side. Of course, burners. It's like we love to debate. It's like, "Oh, you can't possibly be a burner if you don't feel the oh yeah, oh yeah. But
Yeah, and I mean that's a conversation we're going to keep having as technology evolves about the real lived
yeah.
experience of, to use that example, or to say, are you a burner if you've never been to Black Rock City? I
Hmm.
remember meeting burners. I went to the flip side in 2000 in
Hmm.
Austin. I don't remember how many people were there. I want to say it was 800, but I met people who said, "Oh, I'm a burner. I've never been to Burning Man in
Oh
Black Rock
yeah,
City,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm a burner. This is a burn. We go to a burn." And regional burns, I mean, my little brother, rest in peace, was a regional ranger at the
Hmm.
Missouri Burn interviews. And my sister-in-law, my little sister, is still engaged with that community. They call
Hmm.
themselves burners, even though they say it with the same tongue-in-cheek grain of salt, sometimes annoyed that they have to admit it, that we do.
Oh yeah.
When they get crusty and jaded out there, crusty and jaded is a perfectly fine way to burn. I have been crusty and jaded plenty of times.
That sounds like a
So
new Burning Man podcast to me. Oh.
yeah,
Mornings, Burning Man mornings with Krusty and Jaded.
yeah. I've merged into my post crusty, jaded, newly earnest, and then back again a number of times over the course of what I want to say it's 97. I basically fell in and got involved right away. So I've run the gamut, and crusty and
Yeah.
jaded is a valid place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. Like I was saying, for me, like I'd spent 13 years away and I came back and it's like, yeah, there were like, especially just like stories you hear, this, that. But then I get there and I was like, it's as magical as I remember. I mean, of course, this year the weather, like we were talking about, like the weather was perfect, like
Bluebird.
I, the Exodus, like an entry, and it's like, oh, it's only 2 hours,
Yeah.
not the like 12 hours or whatever I heard people were doing in years past. And I was like, I don't see what the big deal. Why is everyone complaining?
And we got a nice dust storm on the way out to remind us who we are. Yeah, I mean, this year, back up. You said something in there that I wanted to catch, and I totally lost it because you got me thinking about Exodus. Um, I'm sorry to do this to you.
We'll say, what did I say? I don't know. I came, or I just like listening to like the stories over the years, like
Oh,
how,
I wanted to ask you,
uh,
because you went away and then you came back.
yeah.
Because this is a unique way to look at it. What is your favorite and your least favorite way that it changed in that period of time?
Well, okay, it was interesting because with Taya, like my second guest episode, we went into this whole big long thing about this, but there was a number of things because we were talking about earlier, like I haven't smoked a cigarette in like what 7 or 10 years. I think you too, like, and I remember back then, like everybody smoked. Like one of the things was like at our camp, it was almost like a regular camp duty was to like to clean out the ashtrays. And if the dust storm was coming up, it was like, get all the ashtrays, get all the cigarette butts, like put everything. And it was always like mooping, walking around. Like we had those Altoid tins, butt boxes.
Yeah.
We had tons of them. Like everyone would always carry them. I'd be walking around the playa. Like this year, I was volunteering at the Nova Heaven thing, so I was like walking out to the deep playa like multiple times, like, and I would always like moop, and I think the entire time walking, I found one cigarette butt. And I was just like, doesn't anybody smoke anymore? You know, and it's funny because as a gift this year, I was like, I'm gonna bring a carton of cigarettes, and I was like, but you don't smoke. And it's like, that's right, I'm gonna give them all away. And then Jenny was like, don't bring a whole carton, you know. And I was like, that's a lot of money, you know. The guy brought 3 packs of cigarettes. I couldn't give them away.
Funny.
You know, like I mean, we had a little bar and like left them on the bar, and then I had to put like a note, like, no, please, please smoke, like somebody, and it took like days, and like nobody was smoking. So that was one thing. That was a very pleasant thing. And also glow sticks was like no such thing as a glow stick
Yeah.
anymore. I
Yeah.
mean,
Don't need
I
them.
yeah, I remember we used to get those like big tubes of them, and we would crack them when we would put them like in the road as like a little arrow like coming to our camp.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
like intentionally like mooping, you know, and
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness we figured out some of those things. There's
yeah,
not as much
yeah.
waste. We figured out how to deal with our trash. We're figuring out more and more, and I think we will continue to figure out ways to
Oh,
do that
yeah.
thing sustainably.
Yeah. And just the
Um,
technologies of different things too, like just like the solar powered like string lights and
right.
stuff, you know, like
All of that.
I mean years ago, like we would bring this like 5,500 watt generator and we would basically run like 3 light bulbs, you know, and this
Right.
like little TV. And we're
We
running
brought
like
our refrigerator one year. I guess camps still do that, but we were
yeah,
not a
that
big,
that
very
would have
big
been a
camp
good
then.
use for it, but like it was like totally like we were like, wasteful. We're like, why do we have this
Yeah.
big huge thing? And now, you know, we're like, oh, you can. I mean, whether it's like ELY or string lights, and there's so many different like technologies for
Yep.
things, and just like looking at all the bikes, like with just like lit up with the lights, like everything, just the sea of lights now, like that it
Yeah.
never was before. And then the
Bikes
other
is going to
thing,
be interesting territory for us because the evolution of e-bikes has people behaving differently, and
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
crunchy thing for us right now, but not for
yeah.
us, the organization, for burners, for the city,
Yeah,
for
because
Black Rock City, it's
I'm
crunchy.
a walker, you know, like I walked like everywhere,
They're
and it's
here.
like, and there wasn't a ton of walkers. I mean, there was definitely a lot of e-bikers, a lot of bikers, but I mean, I don't know, it's just different strokes, different folks, you
Yep.
know.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, and then the other thing I remember saying was just through like the tales and things people told me, and just like you said, like the jaded and crusty burner. And I was like, oh, I bet everyone's gonna be on their freaking phones the whole time walking around, you know, just they're planted like phone planted in front of their face. Pleasantly surprised, you know. I was just like, wow, like I mean, sometimes I see people whip out a phone to like take a picture or something, you know, but
Sure.
it's like much less than just I see walking around here in my life.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny how something like that, I mean, it's probably in the survival guide somewhere, a little hint that maybe put your phone away, but
Hmm.
it's also just kind of a moray. It's a social moray that people look around and they just don't tend to do it. Kind of like asking what you do for a living. We just have not really ever done that there, and I hope it stays
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Keep it in your tent. Nobody wants to see that. Yes, we have Wi-Fi. Don't let anyone see you using that. Yeah, more and more. And
I
I'm
think a
glad
good
that's
sticker is like,
fixed.
that's obscene. Keep it in your tent. And just picture of a phone. You know? Yeah. So the one stick, I don't have it anywhere, but I made a sticker. I think I give it to you? I gave out this year was there's no them, there's only us. And that was quite popular. Like I mean every single person I gave it to, they're just like they'd look at it and they'd just be like, oh, you know, this is great. Can I have a couple more? I'm like, yeah. And
That's
then
one of
like
my keeping it for a special place stickers. Yeah.
yeah, but I think the best thing someone a number of people told me they were like, this is gonna go on my kid's like water bottle.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, as a philosophy in the world, existing as a human,
Hmm.
it is kind of core to my being to remind myself of that as often as possible.
Yeah,
There is
yeah.
no us, me and you, different
Hmm.
separation. There's just us. Um, and when it comes to there, when we talk about sustainability and how we treat each other out there, it is critical to the survival of this event that we love.
Hmm.
So, really, the way I behave in my camp does affect the camp next door in a very
Hmm.
real way. If I drop my trash, it's at my feet.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
there is no us in that regard. If I leave that there and we fail, we
Hmm.
all don't get to have the thing next year. So it's a really poignant and like it's on the surface at all times when you're in that
Hmm.
environment.
Well, maybe that's something good for us all to remember right now in our current climate with social media and this and that, when people are kind of like, arguing this side or that side. It's like, yeah, there is only us, and
Yeah.
ultimately that will be the center that we will all come back to.
Absolutely. We're all having a very different experience of the same thing. But,
But that's what a strong family can do, right? It's just like you have your differences, it's like you have conversations about them, and then you come back together as a family,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly. Those conversations are everything. That's not to say that you have to tolerate bad behavior or any of that, but
You
being
can
able
call
to
it out.
sit and listen
Mm,
to before you make up your mind, contempt without investigation is a very dangerous thing.
exactly,
Without
exactly.
stopping and listening and looking at what's going on uh, for the other person across from you and trying to find the humanity that you share in common.
Hmm.
We're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to add, or you have any plugs or anything you want to highlight or spotlight for the listeners to?
Gosh, the only plug I'll put in is that this year I had the singular joy of not only working and doing some of my recordings on the playa, but I did a theme camp again for the first time in
Oh
like
yeah, Space
18
Cats.
years.
Yeah.
And we did karaoke, and just that simple thing of welcoming people who maybe it was their first time on the playa and
Hmm.
having a theme camp. You did a great theme camp one year that was compliments, right? Didn't you do participate in a camp that when you come in, they talk to you and give you compliments? I thought that was you.
I don't know.
Just
We were
the
the
act
cult of
of
distraction, so it was,
distraction. That was it. It wasn't
yeah.
compliments, it was distraction.
Yeah, our whole thing was like it was a share bar, and we only had one rule, and it was just you may not ask for anything. And people were like, "Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Sit down, start talking, just make a connection, and we'll just start funneling you booze." Like
Well,
nowadays, we've been thinking about reviving it, but as more of like an alcohol free. It actually would be
hell yes,
hell of
brother.
a lot easier, like, oh, did you try that? I gave you for the listeners, I gave Andy this is like powdered passion fruit
Lilikoi.
juice, lilycoy. Yeah, did you try
Yeah,
that?
I did. I love it. I love it. I'm
Yeah.
saving the other one because I was gonna make it for my birthday out there, and then it ended up it's Friday night, and your birthday at Burning Man is an interesting thing. You can get people to
Yeah.
come, but also there's a giant event going on. So
Oh yeah.
I didn't want to make it and not be able to serve it, so I still have some.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had a couple. It was like a guava one, like
I
the
like
guava,
guava.
especially the first thing in the morning, like ice cold, like guava juice. It's like, oh, I mean,
Oh,
it's
Hawaii.
it's so good.
Yeah.
I think that would, like, if we go next year and like do cult of distraction again, I was talking to my brother. It's like that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get this. The one thing we've been dreaming of was this donut machine. Yeah,
Oh,
so fresh donuts and guava juice in the morning, and then maybe at midnight as well.
that's wonderful. I love the theme camp thing of when people just can walk in and say, I know how to
Yeah,
eat a food. I know how to sing a karaoke song.
yeah,
And you get to meet them and that's you don't end up talking about what you do
yeah.
for a living. You get to talk about the immediate moment and maybe
That
did you
was
see the
always,
giant thing out there that does that?
yeah.
You know?
But that was
Yeah,
always the magic to me, was just, yeah, like having like an inviting space and people kind of come up, and I'm just
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
we're not, don't demand anything, no asking, just sit
Yeah.
down, like what you say, like tell me who you are. I don't need to know that, you're in work in finance in the financial district or whatever.
Yeah.
Like just start talking. Just like, I'm a human, you're a
Yeah.
human. We've never
Yeah.
met each other. Let's just start talking. And then things just happen.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's the theme camp thing struck me last year because I feel like there was sort of a tenor online of people who are coming for the first time, like, I have to find a theme camp and participate in a theme. I don't mean
Yeah.
that. They're a fun way to just feel free to wander in and engage with it if you
Oh
haven't been there
yeah.
before. But it's not a requirement to participate. There's lots of ways to do it. So I feel like theme camp, because of the direction of tickets and how that evolved after 2012, and now we're not selling out for the
Yeah.
first time, so the directed
It was
tickets.
going in a new direction now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna see what happens, but don't freak out till it's freak out time is always
Yeah.
my motto
Well,
on
another
that.
thing I had heard was that Burning Man went from like 10% theme camps, 90% open to like the reverse was like 90% theme camps, 10% open. But then this year was a little maybe 70-30 or 60-40 or
I don't know. You'd
something.
have to, I mean, placement has to speak to that, and you
Yeah, I
can
don't
look
know.
at the map and how that all pans out. I loved being in center camp and watching that
Yeah.
imagination, because Media Mech has always been in center camp, so I've watched
Uh-huh.
that space, not just the cafe structure in center
Yeah.
camp, but the whole thing uh,
I like
for
that
20
area.
years.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Downtown BRC.
I
Uh,
know.
it was
I mean, all
fun.
these years, because I was always trying to like get my friends and camp mates like, let's go to like a center camp. When they're always like, oh, what? You want to go there? That's as loud as crazy, all these people. But I don't know. It
Oh,
was
it was
quite vibrant.
gorgeous.
It was nice.
It
Yeah.
was fun. The city redesigned the way it was changed, brought a lot of new
Yeah.
traffic and new energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a jaded year, and then I found a new way. I'm like, well, I guess I'll just do a theme camp. And it was totally stupid. I did not have time to do any such thing. And it was a bunch of work. And it was great. We had so much fun. I did a thing with my friends. It was just so earnest and simple, and a great way to put fresh eyes on about Burning Man next year.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do it again. So
Oh,
if
awesome.
you're feeling a little low on what to do, find another way to plug in.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
still there. It's still magic. It's still doing what it does. And there's new
Hmm.
ways to keep being part of figuring out what the story is. We don't know yet. Let's figure it out. Figure out what
Yeah.
you're going to bring to it.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know. Well, I was gonna say, was there any way where people can contact you, or I don't know, do you want people to contact you? Or like, I know you're doing like your interviews, like if someone was like, oh, I want to be interviewed for your project, or like
Well, unfortunately, the list is quite long already on
ah,
people I have to interview as people who started teams, people who created art back in the day, etc. I'm only a third of the way into my list, and right now that project we're going to hit pause on collecting those stories,
okay.
just because of the moment we're in, fiscally and otherwise, and I'm probably going to still be capturing those stories somehow in this world, but
Hmm.
for now I'm not seeking people to volunteer their stories for that, no, unfortunately, but if you look for Action Girl out there on the social medias, you can find me, and I'll give you some links that you can put my Instagram maybe up for people to be in touch, because
Okay.
I'm friends with some of my regional network friends I've stayed connected with, just like you, over the
Yeah.
years. And I love hearing about what Burning Man means to people in the world to this day.
Yeah.
That's certainly what keeps me going.
Yeah. Well, that's
Is
why I'm doing this project. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you sometime soon.
Yeah, I am so glad you came back and we were neighbors in Black Rock City this year, Andy. Welcome back to
All
BRC, and thanks for having me on the show.
right. Thanks. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts. It just helps to get this show seen. Please tell a friend and help to spread the word. If there's enough support, we can do a lot more of these shows and publish more shows per month. If you would like to contact us about being a guest, what you think about the show, or whatever, please send an email to shadowofthemanpodcast, that's all one word, at gmail.com. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. The links for these pages are all available on the front page of shadowoftheman, all one word, .com. See you next month for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. Don't worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.